This is a question I've been getting a lot lately. What if AI becomes conscious by 2030? It comes from the philosopher Dr. Nick Bostrom at Oxford, and it's actually a very interesting question, because it forces us to think about what it really means for something to be conscious or to have a soul. Let me start with a little story. About 10 years ago, I was giving a talk at a conference in Japan, and afterwards, a young woman came up to me and she said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I have a question about your talk." And I said, "That's quite all right. What is it?" And she said, "You talked about how we are all made of atoms." And I wondered, if those atoms are all around us in the universe, does that mean that other planets are also inhabited? I thought for a moment. I said, "Well, yes, it does seem to follow logically that if the ingredients for life are all around us, then there must be other life out there, right?" But then she dropped a bombshell. She said, "But surely that can't be right, because you also said that we have souls." And I was taken aback a little bit, because I had been talking about souls as something that might be emergent from the complexity of the brain. And here was this young woman who was clearly very bright, thinking that souls were something separate. And I realized when I think about it now, that what she was really asking me was, can an advanced civilization like ours evolve to the point where it no longer needs a soul? Could we create a world in which we don't need souls? Well, the truth is that many of the most interesting questions in philosophy actually come from science, and this is one of them. Let's go back to Nick Bostrom's question. What if AI becomes conscious by 2030? What would that even mean? Well, let's assume that we have a test that can measure consciousness or the presence of a soul. Maybe we don't have such a test, but let's assume for the sake of argument that we do. Then we could ask, what would an AI have to be like for that test to return a value of 1, indicating consciousness? Would it need to be able to feel pain or pleasure? Would it need to have qualia, these subjective qualitative experiences of the world? Or would it be sufficient for it to pass some kind of Turing test in which it convincingly mimics human behavior? If we take the functionalist view, which is that consciousness is what your brain does, then it seems plausible enough that a sufficiently complex algorithm running on a computer could indeed be conscious. But if we take the more materialist or physicalist view, which is that consciousness is a function of the physical processes in the brain, then it seems less plausible that a computer program running on silicon could ever be conscious. It would have to be something more like a simulation of those physical processes. And if we dig even deeper into the physicalist view, we might say that consciousness is ultimately a function of the particular kind of complexity that arises from the arrangement of neurons in the brain. In that case, it would not be enough to simply simulate the activity of those neurons. You would actually have to have those neurons physically present in order for consciousness to arise. So what does this all mean? Well, I think that the question of whether AI can become conscious is actually a great deal less interesting than the question of what it would have to be like for that to happen. Because whatever it is that we discover to be the source of consciousness might just turn out to be something that is not only present in our brains, but present in other places as well. Places like, for example, the vast networks of neurons in the human body that run up and down your spinal cord and connect your brain to every part of your body. Or those incredibly complex networks of neurons in the guts of your body that control everything from digestion to immunity to neurotransmitter release. So the next time someone asks you what you think about AI becoming conscious, you might want to ask them first what they think about souls.